A lonely farmer thought he had lost everything, until a black horse appeared staring at his barn, warning him about a secret inside that could destroy what little he had left. Before we begin, subscribe, like, and leave a comment to help us bring more emotional stories from the heartland to those who need hope. Every morning since his wife's passing, Caleb Harlow woke before the sun, not because he had hope, but because grief wouldn't let him sleep. His farmland stretched wide and silent through the valley, once filled with cattle and life, now reduced to a few thin corn rows and an aging barn that seemed more fragile by the day. The only sounds were the distant call of crows and the whisper of wheat bending beneath early winds. Caleb walked the dusty path with a worn coffee mug in hand, trying to convince himself that today would be better. It never was. But this morning, something felt unusually still. When he looked up from the dirt trail, he froze. A black horse stood at the fence line, tall, muscular, its coat shining even under the dull light of dawn. Eyes sharp as polished coal locked directly on him. Caleb blinked. Horses didn't wander here anymore, not since his ranching days ended. He approached slowly, wary but mesmerized. "Well, you lost." His voice was rough from disuse. The horse didn't move, didn't even flick its ears. Instead, it turned its head toward the barn. Its muscles stiffened. A warning. Caleb followed its gaze. The barn's main doors were cracked open, just an inch. He distinctly remembered latching them last night. A cold prickle crept across Caleb's skin. The horse snorted sharply, stamping its hoof. Not aggressive, but insistent. "You're trying to tell me something, aren't you?" Caleb muttered. He stepped toward the barn, heartbeat thudding in his ears. The horse followed behind him, silent, a dark guardian. The wooden door groaned as Caleb pushed it open fully. Dust swirled in thin beams of morning light, cutting through broken boards. The smell hit first, metallic, unfamiliar. Not hay, not old wood. Something wrong. He squinted into the shadows. Then movement. A figure, hunched, trembling, crouched beside overturned crates. Caleb stumbled back, breath lost. A boy, barely 12, clothes torn, face smeared with dirt and fear. He shielded his eyes from the light, shrinking away from Caleb like a trapped animal. "What in the—" Caleb whispered. Before he could step closer, the black horse stomped and let out a low, urgent whinny, as if reminding him this wasn't over. The boy looked up, and his voice came out as a cracked whisper. "Please don't let them find me." Caleb swallowed hard. "Find you? Who?" A crash behind the barn cut him off, with snapping under forceful steps. Heavy boots. More than one pair. The boy panicked instantly, scrambling backward. "They're coming!" Caleb felt the walls closing in. Whoever those footsteps belonged to, they weren't friendly. The black horse moved into the doorway, body tense, ears pinned back, bracing for threat. Caleb's own fear twisted into something he hadn't felt in a long time. Responsibility. He grabbed the boy's arm. "Hide! Now!" The child scurried behind hay bales just as voices barked outside. "He has to be here. Spread out. Check the barn." Caleb pressed his back to the wall, pulse hammering. The horse stood like a warrior carved from night. Danger had arrived on his land, and Caleb wasn't sure he had the strength to face it. But the black horse did. The men outside spread across the property, like wolves closing in on a wounded deer. Their boots crushed fallen branches, and their flashlights cut through the cracks of the barn walls. Brief flashes of danger slicing into the darkness. Inside, Caleb tried to steady his breath. He hadn't hosted another soul on this land in almost 2 years, and now his barn held 2 uninvited guests, a terrified boy and a black horse that seemed far too intelligent to be wild. Caleb crouched to meet the boy's gaze. "Listen to me," he whispered. "I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I need you to tell me the truth. What's your name?" The boy's eyes darted toward the horse, as if checking whether he should trust Caleb. The stallion stood watch, tail flicking once, ears locked on the barn entrance. "Lucas," the boy whispered. Caleb nodded. "All right, Lucas. Who are those men out there?" Lucas swallowed hard, voice trembling. "They took me, and they took him." He pointed toward the horse. "But he escaped. He came back for me." Caleb's heart thudded. The story didn't make sense yet, but the fear on the boy's face did. "And what do they want with you?" Caleb asked. Before Lucas could answer, bang! A fist slammed against the barn door. Caleb nearly jumped out of skin. "Open up," a man shouted. "We're with the county. We're searching for a runaway juvenile. We just want to get the kid home safe." Their tone was too harsh, too rehearsed, too wrong. Caleb leaned closer to Lucas. "County," he whispered. Lucas shook his head fast, panic returning. "No, they're lying. They work for him." "Him who?" Caleb asked. Lucas's eyes filled with terror. "Mr. Rawlins. He owns Dawson Ranch." He. But the words broke into sobs. Dawson Ranch. The name hit Caleb like ice down his spine. That place had a bad reputation, rumored to hide cruelty behind big money and smiling politicians. Faces Caleb once trusted. He stood and looked at Shadow, the horse. The stallion shifted closer to Lucas, shielding him with his dark body. Protective, loyal. Caleb almost smiled. "You're a good one, aren't you?" he murmured. Shadow huffed, as if answering. Another crash at the barn door ripped the moment short. "We know he's in there," another voice growled. Lucas whimpered. The horse pinned his ears and snorted like thunder, warning anyone on the other side of the door to think twice. Caleb's instincts, rusty but still intact, roared awake. He pointed toward a ladder leading up a narrow loft. "Lucas, get up there. Stay quiet." Lucas hesitated, then scrambled up, Shadow nudging him until he disappeared behind stacks of hay. Caleb grabbed a pitchfork, the only weapon he had, and stepped into the center of the barn. "All right," he told Shadow. "Looks like it's you and me now." Light burst through as the barn doors were shoved wide open. Two men with heavy jackets and unmarked trucks stood in the entry, guns holstered but hands ready. "Morning," Caleb said, raising the pitchfork like a casual farm tool. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The taller man flashed a fake badge. "We're with county services. There's a missing boy. It's urgent." Caleb tilted his head. Must be real urgent if the county's sending armed men instead of social workers. The man's jaw tightened. "Sir, we're not here to argue." Shadow stepped forward, solid as a fortress. He stared down both men like prey who didn't deserve the chase. His hooves pawed the dirt. One wrong move, and he'd charge. "Where'd you get that horse?" the shorter man demanded. "Looks expensive. Dangerous." Caleb's grip tightened on the pitchfork. "He came here on his own." "That horse belongs to Mr. Rawlins," the man snapped. "He's a violent animal, and the boy with him is unstable. We're trying to keep everyone safe." "Safe?" Caleb almost laughed. Nothing about those men screamed safety. "You're not taking either of them," he said firmly. The tall man sighed. "You're making this difficult." The shorter one stepped forward, reaching for his weapon. Shadow reacted first. With a roar-like neigh, he lunged forward, hooves striking the ground so hard the barn shook. The men stumbled back, tripping over themselves as Shadow forced them outside with raw power. Caleb slammed the barn door shut and jammed a metal bar through the handles. Shouting erupted. Fists pounded wood again. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Farmer." Caleb backed away, panting. His heart thundered, but not with fear anymore, with purpose. Lucas peered over the edge of the loft. "Are they gone?" "Not far," Caleb said, "but they won't give up." Shadow nudged Caleb's back, urging him to move. "I know," Caleb whispered. "We need a plan." He stared up at Lucas, then at the horse, then at the barn walls creaking under fists outside. His entire world had been grief and silence for years. Now, in one storm of a morning, he had a reason to fight again, and 2 lives depending on him. The pounding on the barn doors finally stopped, but silence didn't bring relief, only dread. Caleb knew men like that didn't just walk away. They regrouped, they planned, and next time they'd come prepared. Shadow paced near the entrance, muscles still tense, breath huffing sharply through flared nostrils. He was waiting, listening, ready to defend. Caleb looked up to the loft. "Lucas," he whispered, "come down slow. We're okay for now. The boy climbed down the ladder carefully. His eyes, red and swollen, immediately sought Shadow. The stallion pressed his forehead against the boy's chest in reassurance. It was tender, protective, and heartbreaking. Caleb approached them. "All right," he said gently. "I need the full story now. Why are they after you? And what does Mr. Rawlins want with this horse?" Lucas wiped his nose with shaking hand. "Rawlins, he's trying to create champion horses. He pushes them too hard. Hurts them. If a horse refuses to race or panics on the track," his voice cracked, "they disappear." Caleb's blood ran cold. "He did that to Shadow?" Caleb asked. Lucas nodded. Shadow wouldn't let them ride him. He kept trying to escape. So Rawlins ordered the handlers to. He swallowed hard. To break him. Shadow stomped the ground. A violent, furious motion. Caleb's mind reeled. He knew men like Rawlins. Powerful ranch owners with too much greed and too little soul. "And you?" Caleb asked quietly. Lucas curled into himself. "I helped Shadow escape once. Just once. I unlocked the stall. He ran. They caught me. Said if I didn't bring him back, they'd..." Tears spilled again. "They'd make me disappear too." Caleb felt something ignite deep within his chest. A rage long buried beneath grief. "You did the right thing," he said, voice firm, hand steady on Lucas's shoulder. "You saved him. And now we're going to keep each other safe." Lucas looked up, a spark of hope flickering in his eyes. Then Shadow's ears shot up, alert again. He faced the window, nostrils flaring. Caleb peered through a crack in the wood. His breath hitched. 3 trucks had returned. And this time they were blocking all exits. Men jumped out with rifles slung over their shoulders. They moved with practiced coordination. A voice barked from outside. "Burn them out if you have to, but I want that horse alive." Lucas froze. They're going to set fire to the barn. Caleb's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. He scanned the barn, metal buckets, old rope, rusty tools. Nothing that could defend against guns and fire. Shadow snorted sharply, then ran to the back wall of the barn and stomped beneath a boarded-up window. "You want out that way?" Caleb asked. Shadow pawed again, harder. Caleb grabbed a crowbar from a tool rack and jammed it beneath the first board. He heaved with everything he had, shoulders screaming, until it would snap free. He tore down another, then another, until moonlight poured through. The opening was small, barely big enough for a boy, not a full-grown stallion. Lucas trembled. "Shadow won't fit." Caleb set his jaw. "We'll make him fit." Shadow backed up, then charged. His powerful chest slammed the frame, splinters flying. He tried again, muscles straining, hooves scraping. The wood cracked, groaning under force. By the 3rd hit, the structure gave way enough for his shoulders to push through. Caleb didn't think. He acted. He boosted Lucas up first. "Climb onto him," he ordered. Lucas scrambled onto Shadow's back, arms wrapping tightly around the stallion's neck. A gunshot blasted to the barn door, a bullet whizzing past Caleb's head, embedding into a beam. Men shouted orders. "Do it fast." Caleb barked. Shadow forced himself through the gap with a tortured grunt. Body scraping against jagged wood, then landed outside, hooves thudding against grass. "Caleb!" Lucas cried. "Come on." Caleb grabbed the edge and hoisted himself up, but gunfire shattered the remaining boards beside him. Splinters rained down. He hit the ground outside, rolling onto his stomach. Lucas extended his hand. "Run!" Caleb yelled. Shadows swarmed from every direction, the hunters closing in. Caleb grabbed Shadow's stirrup area and threw himself upright as another shot rang out. Shadow bolted. They raced through the dark meadow, the wind hot and wild against Caleb's face. Trucks roared behind them, engines screaming, headlights blazing. They won't stop. Lucas cried. Caleb tightened his grip around the boy to stabilize him and leaned into the stallion's speed. "They can try," he muttered. Shadow leapt a fence, hooves pounding down a dirt road leading into open land. But ahead, torches ignited in the hunter's hands. A flaming trap forming a barrier. Shadow skidded, eyes wide, a deadly decision looming. Fire in front, guns behind. Caleb felt fate closing around them like tightening wire. "Shadow," he whispered, voice shaking. "Pick one and trust us." Shadow's chest heaved, and he turned sharply, right toward the darkest part of the unknown, the woods. Shadow sprinted toward the tree line as the flames behind him roared like a living beast. The scent of burning oil and hay filled the air. Rawlins's men weren't just chasing. They were erasing any evidence that might expose them. Caleb held Lucas securely with one hand and clung to Shadow's thick mane with the other, his heart slamming against his ribs. The boy trembled against him, but kept his head buried in Shadow's neck, trusting the horse more than anything in the world. Branches lashed against Caleb's arms as they plunged into the dense forest, torches flickering behind them like demon eyes in the dark. Gunshots cracked, bullets slicing through leaves, whizzing past their ears. Shadow veered between trees, hooves striking roots and earth with precision. He ran like the forest was part of him, like every trunk and every shadow showed him the way. "You hold on, Lucas," Caleb said through clenched teeth. "We're not stopping." "I won't fall," the boy whispered, though his voice quivered. Caleb forced himself to look back. Just for a second, the forest behind him lit with moving fire. Torches carried with brutal intent. Men stormed through the shadows, yelling orders and curses. But the deeper Shadow ran, the fewer torch lights remained visible. The darkness swallowed up the pursuit. Finally, Shadow slowed, breath loud and steady but powerful, a war drum refusing to stop beating. Caleb inhaled deeply, lungs burning. "You saved us again, boy. I owe you more than my life." Shadow turned his head as if to say we're not safe yet. And he was right. This part of the forest was unfamiliar, even to Caleb, who thought he knew every inch of his land. The trees grew ancient and towering, their canopies blocking out the moon entirely. The air felt thicker, wilder, as if this place lived by a different set of rules. Lucas looked around nervously. "What is this place?" Caleb shook his head. "I don't know. I've never seen the trees like this." Shadow stepped cautiously, every motion alert. He sniffed the air as though searching for a path no human could find. But then a howl rose nearby, followed by another, closer. Lucas flinched. Wolves. Caleb scanned the trees. "They're warning us." Shadow pawed the dirt. "No, they're warning themselves." Something else moved in this forest. Something bigger than wolves. Suddenly, Shadow froze. His ears shot forward, nostrils wide, muscles rigid. Caleb followed his gaze into the underbrush. Eyes, dozens of small amber lights, shimmering through the black. Wolves. A pack. Their forms crept between shadows, silent and calculating. Lucas clutched Caleb's shirt. "What do we do?" Caleb didn't answer, because Shadow did. He stepped forward and unleashed a roar of a whinny, a sound that split through the trees like an ancient command. The wolves halted. A tense stalemate. A single wolf, larger than the rest, scarred across his muzzle, emerged ahead. He didn't snarl. He watched Shadow with wary respect. Caleb realized something then. This stallion wasn't just another horse. He was a leader, a protector, a survivor far deeper than they understood. The alpha wolf let out a short bark and turned away. The rest followed silently, disappearing as if the night itself devoured them. Lucas whispered. "He scared them away?" Caleb nodded slowly. "No," he convinced them. He placed a hand on Shadow's neck. "You are something special." Shadow gently nudged Caleb's side, but with urgency. "Move. Now." The stallion pushed forward again, leading them deeper into the wild. Caleb let him choose their direction. He trusted Shadow more than any map or survival plan he knew. Minutes later, the trees opened into a narrow glade, moonlight finally peeking through. A stream sparkled quietly under silver rays. Shadow walked straight to water and drank deeply, sides still rising and falling with effort. Lucas slid off his back, sitting on a moss-covered rock, hugging his knees. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Caleb crouched beside him. "No, but neither are we." Lucas wiped his face. "I didn't mean to bring trouble to you." Caleb ruffled the boy's hair gently. "Trouble found me a long time ago. You just gave me a reason to fight back." Shadow lifted his head suddenly, ears pricked. Footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Men's voices cut through the trees again. They went this way. Keep your guns ready. Lucas's eyes widened in panic. Caleb's fear twisted into resolve. Shadow, we run together. The stallion stepped between them, a living shield. And once again, with fire behind and death ahead, they ran. Shadow ran, until Caleb felt every heartbeat crashing against his ribs like a hammer. Lucas clung tightly, face buried in Shadow's mane, trying not to cry. The shouts of the hunters faded behind them, swallowed by the forest's deep silence. Finally, Shadow slowed at a steep, rocky incline overlooking an abandoned cattle trail far below. Caleb slid off the horse and steadied Lucas before his legs gave out. The two collapsed against a fallen log, lungs burning, the night's cold breath wrapping around them. For a moment, none of them spoke. Lucas wiped his face with his sleeve and looked up at Caleb, shame creeping into his trembling voice. You should have left me in the barn. You didn't have to risk everything for me. Caleb leaned back, head resting against bark, staring into the dark canopy. No one deserves to be hunted like an animal. Lucas sniffed, hugging himself. They would have stopped chasing if it was just me. But Shadow, they want him no matter what. Shadow lifted his head, nostrils flaring, as if he knew he was the reason they were on the run. Caleb watched the stallion for a long moment. The way he stood alert despite exhaustion, the intelligence in his gaze. He came back for you, Caleb said. That means something. Lucas swallowed hard. Shadow doesn't trust people. Not after what Rollins did. But for some reason, he trusts you. Caleb remained silent, the words cutting deeper than the cold. Trust wasn't something he'd felt from anyone in a long time. Suddenly, Shadow jerked his head toward the trees. Caleb's instincts, once attuned to danger, kicked back in. What is it? Caleb whispered. Then he heard it, a distant rumble. Engines. They were sweeping around, circling from the north. Lucas, Caleb said quietly. We need to keep moving. Lucas tried to stand, but he wobbled, nearly collapsing again. Shadow rushed forward, nudging the boy upright. Caleb noticed Lucas's pant leg, tore at the thigh, soaked darker than the rest of his jeans. Let me see, Caleb insisted. Lucas resisted. It's just a scrape. Caleb peeled the fabric back gently and cursed under his breath. A bullet had grazed him, not life-threatening, but deep enough to bleed heavily and make walking painful. Lucas's small body trembled with shock and fatigue. Caleb glanced toward the path ahead. Steep, rocky, dangerous. Not suitable for a wounded child. Shadow nudged Lucas again, lowering himself slightly. He wants me to ride, Lucas whispered. Caleb shook his head. You're not going alone. Then Shadow turned to Caleb, nudged his chest, and looked back at the trail, an unmistakable message. One rider. One chance. Caleb's throat tightened. You want me to stay behind? Shadow huffed and stamped the ground, harsh, insistent. Lucas's eyes filled with fear. No. Caleb, please, we can't leave you. Caleb forced a steady breath. He looked at the boy, at Shadow, at the forest pressing danger closer each second. If they catch us all, none of us survive, Caleb said quietly. But if one of us gets out, maybe we have a chance. Lucas shook his head vigorously as tears spilled. I won't leave you. Caleb knelt, taking the boy's face in his rough, grimy hands. You're a brave kid, braver than you know, but you gotta trust me now. He glanced at Shadow, who seemed to understand every word. You take him somewhere safe, Caleb whispered to the stallion. Someplace they can't find you. You've done it before. Shadow's dark eyes burned, unwilling to abandon Caleb. I'll buy you time, Caleb added. They won't stop unless they think they've won. Lucas clung to Caleb suddenly, sobbing into his chest. Caleb hugged him tightly, fighting the sting in his own eyes. I'm not losing anyone else, Caleb whispered, the memory of his wife flooding back like a silent wound reopening. Shadow nudged them both gently, a reminder that time was disappearing. Caleb stood, lifting Lucas onto Shadow's back. You hold on, and listen to him. He's smarter than both of us combined. Lucas nodded weakly, wiping his tears with trembling hand. "But what if you don't make it?" he asked, voice cracking. Caleb forced a smirk he didn't feel. "I didn't survive this long by being easy to kill." Shadow pawed the ground. Ready, Caleb stepped back. "Go," he said. Shadow hesitated, torn between instinct and devotion. Then a bullet cracked through the air, striking a tree trunk inches from Caleb's head. "There they are!" A voice roared from the woods. Shadow reared, letting out a furious cry, then bolted down the rocky slope, Lucas clinging desperately as they vanished into the night. Caleb turned toward the approaching voices, gripping a broken branch like a spear. He wasn't strong. He wasn't fast. But fury fueled every breath. "You want to fight?" He growled into the darkness. "Come get it." Lights flooded through the trees, guns raised, and Caleb Harlow stood alone, refusing to run. Caleb braced himself as the hunters emerged between the pines, rifles raised, figures moving like shadows with teeth. Cold fear knotted in his stomach, but he forced his feet to stay planted. He wasn't running. Not anymore. A flashlight beam blinded him. "Put your hands up," one of the men barked. Caleb held his makeshift spear tight. "You're not hurting that boy. Or that horse." The leader scoffed and stepped forward, gun aimed directly at Caleb's chest. "You think you can stop us with a stick?" Caleb swallowed. "I think I can slow you down." The man smirked. Wrong answer. He pulled the trigger. A deafening crack tore the air, and Caleb lurched sideways as the bullet grazed his ribs. Fire ripped through his side, but he didn't fall. He pushed off a tree, lunging forward with a desperate swing. The branch struck the gun barrel, knocking the shot off course a second time. Caleb stumbled, legs shaky, but he forced another swing. A hunter slammed the butt of his rifle into Caleb's jaw. The world exploded in stars. He collapsed to his knees, blood dripping into the leaves. Boots kicked him hard in the ribs, twice, each impact stealing breath and hope. The leader crouched, gripping Caleb's chin so he was forced to look up. "You're no hero," the man spat. "You're a washed-up farmer playing knight in a fairy tale. The world belongs to people who take what they want." Caleb's voice came out ragged. "Then maybe the world needs less of you." The leader shoved him back. "Let's finish this." One of the men raised his rifle, aiming at Caleb's heart. Caleb closed his eyes. He saw his wife smile. The farm the way it once was. He wondered if Lucas and Shadow were far enough yet, if they had a chance. He whispered, "Please keep them safe." Hoofbeats thundered, fast, furious, like a storm with purpose. "What?" the leader shouted, turning toward the sound. Shadow burst through the trees, tearing into the clearing with a roar of hooves and fury. Lucas clung to his back, eyes wide, fear battling courage. Shadow didn't hesitate. He charged straight into the closest hunter. The man was thrown aside like a broken branch, gun flying from his grasp. "Shadow!" Caleb gasped, stunned. The stallion slid between Caleb and the rifles, a living wall of muscle and loyalty. His ears flattened and he pawed the ground violently, daring them to take another step. "Shoot the animal!" someone screamed. 3 guns rose at once. But Caleb, fueled by adrenaline and desperate love, hurled himself at the leader's legs. They crashed to the ground. A shot fired into the air, missing Shadow by inches. Lucas slid from the horse and grabbed the fallen weapon, hands trembling but determined. He aimed not perfect, but close enough that the hunters froze. "Nobody move." Lucas cried, voice cracking but loud. Caleb dragged himself upright and planted a bloodied hand on Shadow's neck. "Good boy, you came back." Shadow pressed against him firmly, as if trying to hold Caleb up, refusing to let him fall. The hunters stared, breath heavy, fear flickering for the first time in her eyes. Not fear of the guns. Fear of the stallion who had returned like vengeance on 4 legs. Finally, the leader spat blood and glared. "This isn't over. Rollins won't stop. There are more of us, always more." Caleb wiped his mouth and tightened his arm around Shadow. "Then send every one of you," he rasped. "We'll still stand." The leader cursed, signaled his men, and they retreated, backing away slowly, steps brittle with humiliation. When the last flashlight vanished behind the trees, silence fell in a heavy wave. Caleb's knees buckled. Shadow lowered himself enough for Caleb to lean against him, steadying him with warmth and strength no human could match. Lucas rushed to Caleb's side. "We have to move. They're coming back with more." Caleb nodded weakly. "I know, but right now." He turned his face into Shadow's mane, inhaling the scent of dust, sweat, and life. "Thank you, partner," he whispered. Shadow breathed softly in return. A promise. They were not alone anymore.